Hello, everyone. Welcome. It's Alan Schimmel from TechStrong, and you're watching another TechStrong Learning webcast. I'm really thrilled to be here with you all today. This is a great edition of a webcast. It's part of our ongoing series. It's part of our partnership with the good folks at AWS and some of their key partners. We're actually going to be featuring a key partner today of AWS, Cognizant. We get more into that in a second as we talk about charting an enhanced path to transformation, an approach to migrating VMware to AWS cloud native services. Of course, it is a hot topic in tech today as due to licensing changes, technology changes, transformation pressures. People are looking at what does it look like to migrate, perhaps off of an on-prem or private cloud VMware type of deployment into the AWS cloud native infrastructure. We're going to get into that. I got a great guy to tell us about it. But before we do, I wanted to take a moment and welcome you to our learning event today. And, we've got two people, we've got some slides. We know you don't like to watch talking heads and slides, either do I. But it's up to you out here to make this the best learning event it can be for you. And how you do that is by interacting with our guest and myself. How do you interact with us? Well, for most of you, it's going to be on the big marker communications interface on the right side of your browser screen. BigMark is the webinar platform we use. I like it. You don't need any plugins or anything. It goes right in. And this communication panel is great. For most of you, predominantly, you're going to use the chat. And in that right-hand communication panel, chat should be in black. Underneath that, you've got public and private chat. Please don't, if you have a friend on here, you want to talk on the private chat, do that. But don't use it to reach out to strangers and ask them if they've been here often or anything like that. Do use the public chat, though, to ask us questions, comment, and here tell us where you're from. Mohammed is already logged on and said greetings from Malaysia. Right back at you, Mohammed, and thanks for joining us. I imagine it's damn near the middle of the night there or late in the evening. So thank you for staying up late with us. I myself am up in sunny Boca Raton, Florida today, where it's 80 degrees and sunny. So, I've been on the internet now damn near 30 years, and it still kind of gets me giggly when I see where people log in from all over the world to come, listen to us do a webinar here. We've got Kabir from Philadelphia. Welcome. Take a moment. Let's make sure you guys all know how to use your chat. Come on here. Tell us where you're from. Say hello. But once we get going, I'd like you to use that chat to ask questions, comments. Give us your thoughts on this subject. It's a fascinating subject. Now, if there's a particular question that you'd like to ask our guest, John Cupid, or I, use next door to chat. It says Q&A. Click on the Q&A, put it in there. I'll see it. I'll see the chat as well. And we'll try to raise that as quick as we can and get you an answer or comment back on it. So thank you very much for doing that. That's how you use it. I see a bunch of you already logging in, telling us where you're from. India is a big country, guys. Ravi, Deepika, we're in India. Mumbai, Bangalore, there's Pune, there's a lot to India. It's like saying I'm in the US. Snowy Lansing, Michigan. Lawrence, I don't envy you there, man. Anyway, let me introduce you to my co-host for today, and he's our resident expert from Cognizant. His name is John Cupid. John is doing us a really big solid here. He's on the road in Las Vegas, and he's up in his hotel room. It's pretty early in Vegas still. So, John, much appreciated coming on here early for you on the road. I know it's not the easiest thing always, but I appreciate you coming on.
No, thank you very much. I really appreciate you staging this seminar for us today. So really looking forward to walking through our approach and answering whatever questions our audience may pose to us today.
Absolutely. John, actually, let me start running through maybe some of these slides here. As I mentioned, John is my co-host. John is the global technical leader for the AWS business unit at Cognizant. John, before we jump in here, and we got the table of contents that we could show people, but before we jump into that, let's assume, look, you see, we got people from all over the world here. A lot of them maybe have never heard of Cognizant before. If you wouldn't mind, maybe we could start there with a little about Cognizant and even a little about your background.
Certainly. My background, I'm based in Plano, Texas. I came to Cognizant from AWS. Prior to that, I was a global CTO for Huawei based in Shenzhen, China. I've been in the industry for approximately 41 years. I have had 10 years at Cisco Systems, at IBM, at Brocade, Fujitsu, most of the large IT entities across the world. With regards to Cognizant, started off as the IT organization of Dun & Bradstreet many years ago, and has now grown to a global system integrator of over 330,000 employees. It is one of the leading global system integrators, particularly in the life sciences and banking, financial services, and insurance industries. With our recent acquisition of Belcan, we're also now moving into the public sector space, as well as the aerospace and defense industry segments as well. We have maintained a 14-year partnership with AWS, now going on 15 years, where as late as 2023, we were named their global system integrator migration partner of the year at reInvent. So we are significantly partnered with AWS. We've enjoyed significant success and have developed several offerings across several different industry segments that facilitates the use of AWS technologies.
Absolutely. Thank you. And that 330,000 people.
Absolutely.
That's a lot of people, man. Good for you. You know, we're already starting to get questions. We got our first Q&A in there, but Tom X, I see your QA. I'm not ignoring it. Let us just start things off, and I'll weave this right in there. John, if you don't mind, I'm going to let you drive the slides here, if it's okay.
Absolutely. Thank you a lot, Alan. Yeah, from a business problem access, as we all know, Broadcom acquired VMware and immediately began to make licensing changes, ending the perpetual license and basically rebundling the VMware constellation of products in different ways and in ways that did not often meet the needs of their customer. And in addition, but because of this rebundling and changing of licensing, many customers, soon learned that their licensing costs were going to increase significantly. We started working with AWS, to identify some of the key business drivers that prevented customers from migrating off of VMware. And Gartner recently released a report which indicated a lot of these hurdles to migration. Many of them involved the amount of the time and detail it took to actually successfully drive a migration off of VMware to a hyperscaler. They talked at length about the actual cost per VM to facilitate that migration, as well as the difficulty in during the migration process of getting all the VMware tools off of those application stacks during the migration process. So in conjunction with AWS, we basically developed a process to help address some of those issues. Because if you look at doing manual, integration or manual migration, it leads to higher costs, significantly greater risks, and bigger headaches. And what we find is that the customer often overpays and is at higher risk during the context of that migration. So what we really focused on was changing the metrics of migrations. We looked to automate the migration process utilizing not only automation in the context of discovery and assessment of the existing environment, but also in terms of automation, in terms of creating a cloud factory based on automated tools to help drive not only workload migration, but also potentially application modernization. And then also to help reduce cloud infrastructure spend by right-sizing the hyperscaler environment.
Yep. Hey,
go ahead.
Before we go further, John, let's get to Tom's question because it's been hanging out there. And his question was, what is VMware in relation to on-prem services? Is VMware hosted also in AWS? And believe it or not, this is a question I've heard before in talking to people around this issue. They'll say, look, I get that the licensing's changed and it's going to be more expensive, but we like VMware, right? Go figure. And but we do want to transform and move to a public cloud infrastructure. Can we just move our VM, lift and shift, so to speak? Can we just move our VMware up to AWS? Pros and cons?
The answer to that is yes. At reInvent 2024, AWS announced a VMware offering on AWS. Now that offering is not to be confused with what many people knew as VMA or VMware on AWS, which was essentially an offering that was done between VMware and AWS, where VMware actually operated the VMware environment on AWS. AWS is no longer selling VMA. However, they do have a new offering where the customer can choose to lift and shift their VMware environment to AWS and run that environment on AWS.
Yep. All right, I'm sorry. Didn't mean to derail you there, John.
Not at all. Not at all. Good question. So let's look and see and evaluate what our approach is, okay? Effectively, our offering we refer to as Broad Axe, and it's an offering where we really focused on enhancing the scale of the migration approach with speed and accuracy. We utilize a unified and automated end-to-end process. It's an application-centric approach in that as part of the migration plan, we look at very closely at application dependencies to help define move groups and migration waves. We've also have created a single platform from a cloud factory standpoint for migration. So you don't have interoperability issues. It allows you to use a single tool for security approval. And it also includes landing zone creation, or if it's the customer who already has a footprint within AWS, it allows us to assess the current landing zone and to make recommendations with regards to improvements to that environment. It allows us to utilize deployment flexibility in that We have the ability to migrate on-prem environments, as well as those customers who may already be on VMA on the AWS environment. This process allows us to handle either one of those customer scenarios. It's a phased approach in that it begins with assessment and mobilization and then migration. So it's fully aligned with the AWS map process. And it's very much a cloud factory model in helping identify move groups, migration waves, doing the landing zone creation, and also driving infrastructure as code generation as well with one of our tools that we've developed in-house. The process is also fully supports the AWS well-architected framework as well, which we feel is very critical in building the correct environment for those customers. So when you look at the process, essentially we're using several different funding mechanisms from AWS to help lower the cost, because one of the key inhibitors to migration is the lack of budget to actually drive that migration from on-prem VMware, for instance, to AWS. So we have several different incentive programs that we can utilize, whether it be the MAP program or the Migration Acceleration Program, the VMware Migration Accelerator, or the VMware Migration Platform. All of these allow us to drive significant business value, both through the incentives as well as the process. In 2024, we won the two largest VMware migrations to AWS, which was Amgen and Johnson & Johnson. And what we found through those migrations is that by doing that migration, we were able to drive a 37% increase in application performance. The infrastructure was 40% more efficient in terms of infrastructure management. We had a 76% reduction in unplanned downtime, a 40% reduction in infrastructure costs, and we're able to achieve migration 46% faster compared to a manual migration approach. So there are several different migration options one can consider for VMware. You can rehost or do your significant or your lift and shift, which tends to have a very low investment, fast return on investment with some cloud benefits. You can re-platform to containers running on EKS. You can go to a managed database to re-platform, or refactor, where you modernize your applications and begin to drive your all of the cloud native benefits that accrue to such a migration. However, that migration does drive the highest investment in terms of required budget to execute. So the modernization pathways on AWS, I'm not going to walk through these block by block due to time limitations. Go ahead.
John, I'm sorry. Travis has a really good question. Count on our audience to cut right to the chase. Travis says, isn't migration to AWS going to be cost and effort prohibitive? Because that's exactly why Broadcom thought they could increase license costs by more than 3x.
It is not cost prohibitive because of the tooling we've developed internally and with our partners to accelerate the migration, and more importantly, to accelerate the assessment of the existing environment. That is really the key here. Plus, you have significant financial incentives from AWS, which help to offset the actual costs of migration to AWS. So when you take in the tool set that we've standardized upon to drive those migrations, which allow you to migrate more accurately and at a faster pace, and add the financial incentives that AWS provides for migration to AWS. In many cases, we have customers where we've done migration with a $0 statement of work. Okay. In other words, we were able to achieve the migration, and the financial incentives provided to us fully covered the cost of the migration. Now, let me, please don't walk away thinking that all migrations are going to be $0, because that is not the case. But
in the world of unicorns and rainbows, it might be, John.
Well, we have several customers where we've been able to achieve $0 migration for them. So through the incentives and through our ability to accelerate the migration process. So the financial implications of migration are not necessarily the blocker to migration that Broadcom thought they would be.
I got another point here from Arcady. And again, count on our audience, man. They are wired in and plugged in. He says that as of April 30th of last year, VMware Cloud on AWS is no longer resold by AWS or its channel. Is that the VMA you were talking about?
That is the VMA. That is correct. At reInvent in December of 2024, AWS announced the fact that it would be supporting VMware on AWS. The key difference between the two offerings is that VMA was actually managed and ran by VMware. They had system engineers who actually ran those workloads for customers on AWS infrastructure. This new offering that AWS is providing, the customer manages the VMware workloads, but they are deployed on AWS infrastructure.
Got it. All right.
So from a migration motion, utilizing, automated tools, what we felt that was very key here was to be able to drive a rapid assessment to help drive risk mitigation, to help create a high-level strategy and decision-making with the customer, to then move into a deep assessment phase to enhance the accuracy of the assessment, as well as resource forecasting and optimized strategy to drive your dependency mappings with the application and services, to look at the workload architecture to begin to define move groups and migration waves, and to be able to create a high-level and low-level design for the AWS environment, as well as to deal with any integration issues or corner cases that might exist in that customer environment. And then from the Cloud Factory standpoint, orchestration becomes the really critical aspect of this in terms of acceleration, being able to drive a factory model to migrate at scale, where we're talking about thousands of virtual machines, to be able to right size and save resources in the context of the migration, utilizing infrastructure code, either the creation or the enhancement of existing landing zones, and then to drive install scripts that can be done either utilizing Ansible, PowerShell, Python, or Helm charts. And then, based on the standards, both from an infrastructure and security aspect that customer desires to drive in that environment, to be able to ensure policy compliance as those workloads are migrated to the AWS environment. And then last but not least, from the migration standpoint, we wanted to be able, from that orchestration perspective, to streamline the migration to ensure optimal allocation of resources to those workloads, to drive business continuity and disaster recovery appropriate or based on the requirements of that particular customer, and then also to ensure authentication, configuration management, testing, and then as well as training of the customer staff to be able to operate that environment, and then to facilitate, cutover, completion, submission of as-built documentation and run books, and then be able to provide day 2 support if the customer desires it after they sign off on the completion documents.
Excellent.
So from a tools landscape, again, I apologize for an eye chart, but this kind of gives you an ideal of all the different tools that we have integrated into our into our approach, and that we utilize in the context of the migration. From a database tools and accelerators standpoint, we obviously utilize the standard AWS tools, whether it be data migration service or schema conversion tool. We've also have built a data validation tool that we refer to as DVS. We also have created a database migration factory, which allows us to automate the migration planning. It allows us to discover the existing databases out there, to be able to right size them for migration to the AWS environment, to be able to minimize the time required for ongoing migration and replication. For those situations where the customer wants to switch to a AWS cloud native database, it allows us to convert the database schema from one database engine to another. And more importantly, it provides us with a significant amount of time and cost reduction. We find the average reduction, approximately a 40% timeline reduction with regards to migrating databases, which provides a 30% cost reduction. And it also allows us to improve the quality and reduce risk, as well as issues, through enabling a repeatable process, a process which is automated and fully monitored end to end, and the use of our dedicated database experts that we have within Cognizant. So these next few slides, I provide them because I know that a lot of individuals here are technology focused, and really want to understand what we're doing more, particularly with our infrastructure as code generator and things of that nature. So essentially the IAC generator allows us to access it from anywhere. So that allows us to utilize the tool no matter where the particular workforce is located, what region of the world that workforce is located in. It's very simple to use. There's no need for a great deal of Terraform or CFN expertise. It allows us to provide consistency as well as fast track our operations. Effectively, you log into the portal, you key in the number of resources against each type, and then the generator generates the appropriate template with code. You can modify that template in the portal to add any unique parameters that are required for that particular code. You then generate the code and you're free to use it at that point in time. So from a agile pod standpoint, where you create a number of agile pods driving your cloud factory, having a tool like this significantly accelerates the speed and the rate and the accuracy at which you can not only build out new infrastructure but also migrate workloads to that AWS environment. From a migration standpoint, there are several different tools that we can utilize for migration. Obviously here, this particular chart demonstrates how Cloud Migration Factory can be utilized in the context of a VMware migration. That approach tends to also call the AWS Application Migration Service, the MGN processes. And the important thing to recognize here is and where most of our customers really ask a lot of technical questions is really trying to understand the lifecycle state transition of AWS and MGM in terms of understanding the agent install process and how the agent is initiated with regards to the replication agent on the workloads that exists on-prem, for example, on the customer environment. How MGN then launches test instances to ensure that those test instances work. The tests are executed. Those instances are then marked ready for cutover. And then you effectively launch the cutover instances, finalize the cutover, and then the cutover is complete. So being able to understand that lifecycle state transition and being able to understand what occurs at every step of that state transition is very critical to give your customer confidence that you actually know what you're doing. And because when you start talking about automating these processes, you can't just go in there with smoke and mirrors. Customers want to know what precisely is happening at each state change of that automated process. So that's why I included this data in this presentation, because when you present to customers, you're going to find out that you're going to get a lot of questions around the automation process and what the state transition parameters are in that automated process.
So, John, we've got a question around that right here. Martin asked, where are your automation tools homemade, or did you use other tools too? Does AWS have their tools that you're using for this? Arcady seems to have a link. Arcady, if you wouldn't mind putting that in the main chat, maybe.
Yeah, let's go back to the tool landscape. What we've done is that these are basically the set of tools that we're utilizing for each portion of our cloud migration process to AWS. What we have done is that we have integrated these tools. Some of them are AWS native tools. Some of them are third-party tools. We have, effectively integrated those tools into our cloud factory so that from a migration standpoint, the cloud factory looks as if it's one integrated platform, but it's a platform that utilizes a whole host of different tools. A lot of times, the customer may actually dictate to us, which tool they would like for us to use. So that's why this particular tools landscape looks like an eye chart, because over the course of time, we've taken the steps not only to build our own tools in-house, but also to integrate third-party tools as well as tools from AWS into that platform to be able to take advantage of them in the context of a migration.
It's great, John. I didn't mean to throw you off here. I know we went backwards, but
No, not at all. Good questions. Now, one other part, well, we've got two other partners that we utilize for VMware migration. We utilize Matilda Cloud to effectively it provides us with a very quick way of doing rehosting on AWS. And it provides an end-to-end flow, which allows us to very rapidly remove all of the existing VMware tools, as well as sensors that may already be integrated in those workloads. So this gives us a way of being able to very rapidly facilitate rehosting of VMware workloads on AWS. Again, I'm not, for database migration, we predominantly utilize either DMS or SCT, but we also utilize some of the other tools that I talked about earlier, particularly for validation of data across that environment. And then from a testing standpoint, we also utilize what we refer to as dev space, which is our developed module to facilitate continuous performance and vulnerability testing, both from a end-to-end testing perspective, as well as from a security testing standpoint. Now, I think it's important, again, to kind of reiterate, what some of the major customer blockers are with regards to migration AWS native services. First and foremost is the licensing costs, particularly Windows Server and storage costs, the lack of AWS skills that may be present within the customer environment. One of the ways that we work around that is that we do provide training for the customers, and we also have a managed services environment where we manage the AWS environment after the migration is complete. So there are a couple of different ways that we address that blocker. The no time, no budget to migrate, the incentives, as well as our ability to accelerate the time frame and reduce the resources required to facilitate the migration, addresses that blocker. And then when we look at migration costs, there's a belief out there that the majority of those workloads will need to be rehosted. And what I'm here to tell you is that we have found that the amount of workloads that require to be rehosted is much lower than what we initially anticipated. So for those reasons, we feel that the BroadX offering addresses all of those key hurdles to migration. It addresses speed to business value. It provides immediate impact. It utilizes a process that is a proven way of working. We've used this process for two of the largest VMware migrations to AWS, involving thousands of virtual machines, many different applications. And we are very confident that we have embedded very high performance in our cloud factory, and that it's aligned to a very modern and automated way of working. We have a very sustainable operating cost in that our commercial model, we're driving cloud factory at scale We're delivering our value to our customers via right-shored, right-sized, and readily expandable squads of resources. We have committed over the last 2 years to a relentless focus on automation. And this not only applies to our VMware offering, it applies to most, if not all, of our different migration offerings that Cognizant provides to AWS. We've have aggressively invested in and driven Cloud Factory efficiency to drive reusable blueprints. We've worked with our AWS Alliance and have created literally 80 to 90 reusable blueprints, as well as the ability to drive catalog self-service capabilities. And when it comes to AWS, we are experts. We have well over 17,000 resources across the company that have been trained and certified on AWS. We bring very deep cloud expertise, and that expertise not only is focused on migration, it's also focused on other things such as mainframe migration and modernization. It's focused on HPC. We are currently the only global system integrator in the world that's certified for HPC deployments on AWS. So we bring very deep experience. We bring solutions and offerings, assets, and a large number of people with significant experience in cloud transformation. And we also focus on this notion of dual delivery, where we're not only delivering the solution, but we're also delivering the training and the expertise to our customers' IT teams to be able to learn and develop and operate successfully an AWS environment. Last but not least, we have a very long history of collaboration with AWS. That collaboration mindset is exhibited across many of the dual engagements we've done with AWS, particularly with ProServe across many of our customer engagements. And we feel very strongly that the hard work we've executed over the last 14 to 15 years, plus the experience we've developed in collaboration with AWS, provides significant business value to our customers. So from a financial, so let me stop here and ask if anyone has any questions before we start walking through some of the
John, I don't
financial
see any. I bring them up, but audience, if you have questions, we kind of built a little break section in here. Just catch your breath and catch the break. You know, John, one of the things and we might talk about it in future slides, is, you know, in spite of Satya Nadella saying SaaS is dead, some people still like to run a managed service, software as a service. Is that part of the Cognizant model here? It may not be true SaaS in that sense of the word, but whether it's an MSP model or just, you know, more of a traditional a contractor model where, you know, you got this thing migrated, it's transformed, it's up and running, but I need help to keep it up and running, keep it well oiled, keep it moving forward, you know, maintaining it. Is that, you know, how big a role does Cognizant play in that?
We do play a role in that we do provide managed service offerings for AWS infrastructure. And in fact, I've had several customers where we've actually migrated their workloads to AWS, and then a Cognizant team took over the managed operation of the AWS environment for that customer. That is part and parcel of this offering. It is an option the customer can consider. We do not have a SaaS offering as such. but we do have a managed services offering where a Cognizant team will migrate workloads to AWS, build out the AWS infrastructure for the customer, migrate those workloads, and then a managed services team will then take over the operation of the AWS environment on behalf of the customer.
So John, 100 years ago, I helped take a company public. We were what they call an ASP. You're old enough to remember because you're my age.
Yep.
Application service provider. And we were doing just that then. It wasn't really SaaS because people don't, VMware's or the whole hypervisor thing, it's not an application per se, it's the platform. And so, I don't know if a true SaaS lends itself. But a lesson I learned back then is that no two implementations are exactly the same. They're usually all about 80, 85% the same, let's say. But that last 15, 20%, devil's in the details. It makes all the difference in the world. I wonder if do you guys see a similar type of pattern?
Yeah, absolutely. And particularly with, applications like SAP, for example, because we support the SAP Rise Plus offering on AWS. And what I find, I call it's another example of the 80-20 rule in that, 80% of key applications like SAP are pretty consistent across customers, but it's that 20% of custom changes to the software that you have to really be aware of from an application perspective. Because in almost every instance, if it's a well-known software package, for instance, like SAP, you're going to find 20% of that is custom code based on the specific needs of that customer. And those are the areas that you really have to take care in during the assessment phase, is to understand what is custom code and understand how you're going to handle that custom code in the migration process. Does that custom code need to be reworked? Is it going to require, significant application modernization in order to facilitate that custom code on the AWS environment? Those are areas that you have to pay particular attention to during the assessment phase of the engagement.
Excellent. All right, John, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to derail us here, but we've got 9 minutes left. Go ahead.
Absolutely. From the key financial incentive approaches, the thing to realize, and one thing, I'd said earlier about zero statements of work to customers, I wanted to provide you an example of a zero statement of work for over a 2,200 virtual machine migration of VMware to AWS. Within the Amgen deal, that turned out to be a $0 statement of work from the migration standpoint, in that the total MAP funding covered the total cost of migration to Amgen. Now, I will point out, now that that covered the Cognizant cost of migration. The customer to facilitate that migration was paying approximately $9 million a year in ARR to AWS to be able to host those virtual machines on AWS, but the actual migration cost was a $0 SOW. So these incentives provide, a significant amount of financial assistance to drive these migrations. The MAP program really quickly provides 5% of ARR up to a $75,000 maximum for the assessment phase. During the mobilization phase, you receive the system integrators pay 20% of ARR, which is a maximum of $2 million in partner cash. And then for the migration standpoint, the customer gets credit of 25% of ARR to go toward their AWS bill. So again, from a budgetary standpoint, these financial incentive programs, whether it's the VMware Migration Accelerator, the VMware Migration Program, or the Migration Acceleration Program, can make migration a reality for customers. It can make it a $0 migration in terms of what they would owe Cognizant at the end of the day. So for those Cognizant CPs, CRMs, and SLSs who are looking to take advantage of Heirloom and River Meadow as a migration tool, AWS is also paying the costs for these tools. So these tools can be utilized by Cognizant at $0. These are the steps that you would take. I strongly recommend that you work with the AWS business group to be able to drive the intake form to ensure that it's done properly. And you're not obligated to use either Heirloom or River Meadow, but there are migration situations where either tool could be the optimum tool to really accelerate migration of VMware workloads. And it should certainly be considered and taken advantage of. Again, to close, I wanted to walk through, and make everyone aware of our robust partnership with AWS. It's is a partnership that is strategically important to both companies, and it is a partnership that both companies have made substantial investment in terms of support, as well as financial resources and incentives. Some key reasons why we're confident of successfully delivering BroadX. This charts 5 different use cases where we've facilitated VMware or very large scale cloud migration across most of these are across financial service customers. I highlight, in this case, financial services customers because typically they tend to be the most conservative about driving migrations. And, we were able to differentiate our process as well as our ability to mitigate risk to win and successfully execute all of these large-scale application and data migrations to AWS.
Hey, John, if I could stop, I got one more. I apologize. I know we want to wrap up. Martin wanted to ask if you guys ever used Concerto for some of the projects you worked on here in the migrations. Familiar?
I am familiar with Concerto. I am not aware of us actually using it on a migration project, but I am aware of it. I have evaluated it, and the tool set that we have, as illustrated by that Tools 2.0 slide, is significantly, it's a very enhanced tool set. Um, and right now we feel, very strongly that, for purposes of VMware migration, that we have the right tool set and have partnered with the correct third parties as well as AWS to drive a very efficient cloud factory for migration purposes.
Okay. John, before I got to do this because I'll forget. I apologize, but I know me. Before we go any further, hey, Tip, our back end engineer, has been kind enough to put into the chat for everyone. There's a ton of slides. There's actually 38 slides in this presentation. John's at 35. We got one or two to close it out. But there were slides we didn't go into that have a lot of great information as well. If you guys want to download the slides and at your leisure, take a look at them, please do so. Tip K is our engineer here. She's put it on the chat for you. And I also mentioned that the only way we get these learning events to be better is through your feedback. So if you can take it, even doesn't even take a minute, but take a moment to complete our survey so we know what you like and dislike, and we can hopefully give you more of what you like. John, take us home.
Absolutely. Last but not least, for those of you who might question, the scalability of our cloud migration process, we actually facilitated a data center exit for 3M, which involved well over 12,000 virtual machines. We were, able to reduce, their total cost of ownership on AWS by about 30%, saved them over $2 million year over year in database licensing cost savings. And more importantly, we're able to achieve this in approximately 27 months together, altogether. So that's one of the key reasons why we are so confident on our ability to be able to handle any major migration, whether it involves VMware or any other set of applications to AWS. So some key lessons learned, and then these are some things you should think through as you're considering your migrations. Project governance is really critical with these types of large-scale migrations. And you need to put emphasis on continuous visibility, particularly on your Scrum teams, monitoring their efforts, and then closely controlling your deliverables, timelines, and costs. You've got to have open and transparent communication channels, particularly in situations where the customer may be using multiple partners. For instance, we've done some migrations where we've actually done the migration, but another partner was chosen to do the application modernization. So you've got to very early on establish communications to ensure that everyone knows what everyone else is doing and what's going on. That means you've got to clearly define the roles and responsibilities of each partner involved in the project by using well-documented RACI. You've got to devote sufficient time to develop a comprehensive migration plan. We refer to it as a migration MOP, or method of procedure, which encompasses all aspects of the project. And that should include your assessment findings, your timelines, your resource allocations, as well as your potential risks and remediation strategies. Too many times I find that customers have tried these migrations on their own, and they failed because they got to a point that they didn't think about or significantly assess. Like, for instance, how to deal with custom code in a migration effort. Those are the real killers here. So you've got to devote sufficient time to that, and you've got to, you got to have expertise on the team doing that, who have done enough of these to know where the bodies are buried at, where the gotchas are located. And then last but not least, you've got to ensure that everyone adheres to the project security policies, including data security and compliance regulations. A lot of times people get caught up in timelines and they forget basic security policies when they're trying to migrate data over to the environment. That's a huge no-no for me. I'd rather take the delay than violate a customer's security policies by trying to cut a corner on how I migrate data to the AWS environment. So with that, I'd like to thank all of you today for joining us. I hope, I apologize that we didn't get to cover each and every slide in detail, but that's one reason why I'm providing you with the slides. Feel free, if you have any questions afterwards, please, can they send those questions to you or can they email them directly to me, Alan?
They could send them directly to you if you'd like.
Sure.
I think your contact was in there, but so John, we're serious about people's time. We're a minute over the top of the hour. I got to wrap. But okay. Hey, man, great presentation. Keep up the great work at Cognizant. Many people have on here have, said excellent session. Thank you. Thank you for attending. And John, as I told you when we first started, these sessions are as good as the audience is. So this was a great audience. So thank you all very much. Until next time, this is Alan Schimmel for TechStrong, for AWS, and for Cognizant. Thanks for being with us today, everyone. We're out of here.